Okay, Terry, I've got about, I think a few more people, at least maybe three or four that are going to join, but I've got 9 o'clock straight up. So if you want to go ahead and get started, we can.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Okay.
Well, go ahead.
Okay. All right. I'll just welcome everybody quickly. Thank you for joining us for this meeting of the Commonwealth North's Food Security Study Group. And our topic today is mass feeding programs, capacity and infrastructure. I we have a smaller group today, so it'll be easy to have open mics. And when we get to question and answer, we can just be a little bit more informal in these study group sessions. So with that, let me turn it over to the co-chair for our study group and our Commonwealth North Board President, Terry Smith. Terry?
Good morning, and thank you, Juanetta. And thank you, everyone that is joining us together today by Zoom. We are finding that this communications method is growing in popularity, and it's working well for us. As we learn how to better use this tool, please send us your suggestions and ideas and best practices to help make it a better experience for everybody. So we're open to suggestions, so appreciate that. Today we have three major nonprofits that bring a unique perspective in food delivery systems to all of the constituencies that they serve. And we've been studying food security at Commonwealth North for a little more than a year. We took a little hiatus as we were getting a couple of things dialed in, but we are re-engaging the topic to produce a white paper this fall for delivery to the legislature. So we've had about, call it 6 or 7 different meetings on the topic and have really come to a couple of really thoughts and I guess topics that we're kind of resonating around. And them is that we've had a lot of fits and starts in the infrastructure in bringing the topic of food security to really to demonstrate leadership and I think give everybody a good sense of where food security is in Alaska. And so what we're seeing from our vantage point at this point is a number of disconnects. And so what we're looking to get our arms around is what are the top 3 or 4 main policy recommendations that we can deliver to the legislature that we can put in place tomorrow and those that are longer lead times. So we're very interested to hear our speakers today, and I think the format we've given everybody is 10 minutes. Don't have to use it all if you don't want to, but 10 minutes to share with the study group what you folks are doing on the front line to help not only reinforce food security to support your constituencies, but other things that might be in the works. And then we'll leave it open for more of a general conversation after that. And as Juanetta said, make this very informal. We really enjoy these times and appreciate your coming and sharing with us your ideas. So with that, Juanetta, who do you think we should lead off with, or do we have a set schedule for that?
Let's start with Major John Brackenberry with the Salvation Army division here in Alaska, and he's also joined by Captain Denise Delgado. So we'll turn it over to Captain Brackenberry.
Very good, thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I know we're all getting used to this whole Zoom thing, and I had a meeting with the chamber the other day and could not get the mic to work, and then the whole thing shut down, and it was quite bothersome. Anyway, thank you again for the opportunity to come together and just to be able to share and talk a little bit about what we are doing and some of the areas that we've been helping across the state. As been mentioned, I'm joined by Captain Denise Delgado, who is a part of our incident command system, where she served on the logistics and team and helping to get things out and about throughout the state. One of the biggest things that we've had to deal with is food and the food insecurities that we see, not necessarily here in Anchorage, because the Salvation Army has 19 different locations across the state, 9 of them here in South Central and 10 in Southeast. And so while we dealt with food issues here in Anchorage, we were seeing an increase in the number of people coming to us receiving food boxes, in some locations quadruple what they would have normally seen. There are many of our locations as well that continue to provide congregate meals. That had to change. It was more of a takeaway setting. We could not do, obviously, because of all the restrictions, have sit-down meals anymore. And so we are still doing that. So the issue that we had was getting food out to our locations, as well as PPEs and the takeaway meal components. That for us was the biggest hurdle that we had to deal with. And I can let Captain Denise speak about that in a minute as well. But we did struggle to get food, first off. And so we are working on that in the long term of warehousing more shelf-stable food for this type of emergency or something else in the future. One of the concerns we had, though, off the beginning was getting food out to some of our locations. We were already having problems with food insecurity in the village of Hoonah and Angoon before COVID really even hit, because of the ferry system being down. And I think that's probably going to be the biggest struggle that we and others have in the coming days, months, even years, if we as a state don't fix that problem. The ferries being shut down during the winter months for our friends in the Southeast was near devastating. And we started, again, before COVID even took place, we were working with the state to find ways of being able to get food transported into some of those villages to allow for food to be distributed. Fortunately, we didn't have to go to the extreme of getting helicopters to fly in from Juneau to bring it over, but that does pose a problem in the future. We are on the road system, and so when roads don't work or they're closed at the borders, getting food up here is a bit more challenging. Yes, you could take it up by ship, but then there could be issues with that as well. So we've got a couple of things we're working on as far as looking at warehousing food, and not just here in Anchorage, but also in strategic locations across the state, in order to better meet that need and not be solely reliant on everything coming into Anchorage and then shipping it back out again. But I think there really needs to be some type of discussion. If the ferry system continues as it is, what does that say for our folks in Southeast that really rely on it, as well as here in South Central? It's not that big of a thing here, but you have villages of Yakutat, Cordova, and Kodiak that rely on the ferry as well, and people getting back and forth, and that's how some of their stuff gets in. So it is a concern of ours. It's right now, it's better because ferries are up and operational, nowhere near what they should be. But my concern has come this fall, this September and October. If they go back down again, weather conditions will prevent them from sailing as frequently as we would like. And that's just something that I think for dealing with the issue of food insecurity is, how do we reach some of these villages? We had a donation from ConocoPhillips to be able to provide food to the village of Bethel, and we couldn't get it in. Again, this was before COVID even hit, because there was an embargo that was taking place at the tail end of last year, November, December. We could not get the food in. We just got it in a month ago. So there's issues there that prevent us from being able to provide the services that we need to, excuse me, for those villages because of travel conditions or restrictions, or just living in Alaska, which makes it extremely difficult. So there's got to be a way that we're able to get that kind of stuff in and around. You can warehouse food, but if you can't get it in, then that's going to be a challenge in and of itself. I'm not sure how much time I took, but I'll let Captain Denise talk about maybe more specifics, or if there are specific areas that I didn't touch on that she can raise as well.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So as Major John was talking about, I couldn't echo his exact sentiments enough. The biggest challenge we are facing currently, so we are still serving roughly a little bit over 2,000 meals a day to homebound seniors, to people in cold weather shelters, to non-congregate meals, and those that are being quarantined because of COVID. And we're still continuing to meet those needs, but we're also seeing a really hardship trying to locate milk, pork, beef, and eggs. You know, because of COVID, a lot of plants have shut down and are reevaluating and restructuring, and so we are now starting to fill that here. We use U.S. Foods, we use the Alaska Food Bank, and we use a couple of other vendors, and also reaching out to vendors locally for our seafood, for Copperhead Seafood. We use them for our fish products, but those are what we're starting to see now. As Major John was saying, that the people that we're dealing with, you know, like even the kiddos that are at home right now, I know that the schools are still serving those kids, and I'm hoping that we can help to be a site to distribute during summer months as well. But it's looking forward ahead as well, and when those companies are to come back online, and how we are trying to get that product. We have wonderful vendors that we work with that we're starting to see that supplies and quantities were going down, and alerted us to that, as well as our head cooks looking at that and ordering ahead of time to make sure that we had enough in our freezers to still continue to meet the capacity we're still pushing out towards. But if anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy.
Oh, okay. And thank you. Did you have something else you wanted to say, Major John?
No, I was just going to say, if there was anything else, I'm hoping we covered what it was that you're needing, and if there was any questions that anybody had. I mean, I know this is sort of an informal dialogue, but you know, please feel free to ask, because
Sure.
you know.
Just to that point, so I think what would be best, this is Terry, is because you've hit on a couple of ahas for me. So I think what we'll do is we'll save these deeper dives till we get all the speakers out.
Sure.
And but no, you've already raised my eyebrows on a couple of topics. So.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, actually, Lisa, if you're ready, we'll go ahead and toss to you if you're.
Sure, absolutely. So we've been extremely busy as well. Our focus is all here in Anchorage. As most of you probably know, on March 21st, we were asked by the municipality to move our emergency cold weather shelter operations to the Sullivan and Ben Boeke Arena, and eventually ramp up for a capacity of 480 people, which we were able to do in a really short time frame. COVID has dramatically changed our model of food distribution, both on our Beans Cafe shelter operations side and our children's lunchbox meal program. I'll talk a little bit first about beans. We made decisions early on to really kind of isolate our kitchens, both of our commercial kitchens. We have one for children's lunchbox and one for beans, which the beans one is at the former site where we used to serve clients as well. When all client services were transferred over to Sullivan, we really kind of locked that down as a food production facility, converted the dining area into additional food production and storage, and ramped up. One of the biggest changes for us was going from basically an all volunteer workforce with, one chef and one what we call accountability person to having to employ people. We were fortunate that the National Guard did come in and help us for a period of time as we were ramping up to find funding and to hire folks to prepare the meals. We went from having meals prepared on site and served in a congregate fashion to doing individually prepared breakfast and lunches, and kind of more of a congregate style dinner that were all served at Sullivan Boeke Arenas. We've now helped to, with our partners, move enough people out of the mass emergency shelter that we're down to just the Sullivan Arena with a capacity of 340 people. It's been really interesting and a lot of lessons learned along the way, but we're again kind of switching our model, not only from the not as much congregate, although we're still in a congregate setting. What we're doing right now is what we're calling a meals on demand. And we're doing that for several reasons. One, it will cut down on waste. Basically, people come up and can select kind of what they want. It also means we don't have to have 324 of the same item to serve everybody that may be in shelter. So that helps us with sourcing our food and using the available resources we have. We right now are doing breakfast and lunch as a meals on demand service. So basically what that means is the clients can come up anytime during a certain period of time. We're trying to keep that open and allow, maybe an hour or so for us to switch over from breakfast to lunch. But it's not a, 7 a.m. cattle call. Everybody has to get in line and get breakfast and everybody gets the same thing on their tray. We're trying to help move our clients from a scarcity mindset, help them feel secure that they will know where their next meal is coming from, and give them a little bit of choice to help them have some dignity in the situation, which is very difficult when you're frankly living in a sports arena. It's working really well. We're still trying to get the clients to understand that you don't have to line up right when it starts. We promise we're going to have a meal for everybody. So we're getting there, but it's really, I think, going to be a great model for us. And next week we will start with dinner. And what we're going to kind of do is like themes, like every night I'll kind of have a little bit different themes. So for example, maybe Monday night is, Asian food, and we're going to have, a pork and a beef, or a chicken and a pork, or what we have available that we can serve, and then maybe 2 or 3 vegetables and a starch. It could be a noodle, it could be a rice, and people can pick, and they say, I want the beef, and I want the broccoli, and I want the noodles. I don't want the other stuff. Again, eliminating waste. We're really trying to be super good stewards of our food, because as the major mentioned, we're all a little worried about what does this look like long term. And I think the more we can conserve food, the better off we're going to be. We had started down a whole path of food rescue before everything kind of closed up, and that's something we hope to reinstate, working with Denina Center and Captain Cook and other large hotels as they do conferences, that we would be able to receive their leftover food and repackage that can be used for people going from shelter into housing, but maybe don't have the capacity to cook for themselves, shop for themselves, prep it. We see people are moving into housing and, frankly, they don't have a fork or a shower curtain. Their main priority is not, am I going to make, beef and broccoli tonight? It's, how am I even surviving still, even though I'm not in shelter? On the children's lunchbox side, again, everything has changed. No congregate meal requirement with our prepared meal program, which is funded through the Child Nutrition Program, CACFP, and SFSP, depending on the time of year. And I can explain those definitions later if you'd like, but basically it's federal USDA funding that comes to the state Child Nutrition Program that then goes out through various providers, including us. We've seen a ramping up in that. In addition to the meals, we really recognized that there was a huge need for not just the kids, but for the families. And we had started this last school year with providing pantries in some of the schools that we had a weekend food program, because we were seeing that the weekend food bag for a child wasn't enough to sustain the families, that they needed more than just that one bag of food. And so we've expanded that into a pantry pack program where we set a goal of raising enough money to ensure that we would have funds to prepare and distribute 50,000 pantry packs. And I'm thrilled to say that we have raised those funds, and we're bringing in additional partners who are helping us distribute them in creative ways at different sites. We've been able to tap in with Charlie's Produce on the pantry boxes. So we're distributing at sites right now children's meals, pantry packs, and the produce boxes. The response has been really great to it, and again, it's giving people some choices, and helping them to feel secure that they know where their next meal is coming from, because people were really, really scared. And I think people are settling a little bit more comfortable that they feel assured that they're going to have access to food, which is super important. I think some of the biggest needs is flexible dollars for feeding people, because, you know, if you've got a hungry child, yes, we can leverage those federal dollars to pay for that meal, but their mother's probably already hungry. Maybe their, you know, 21-year-old sibling is hungry, and we can't use those federal dollars to pay for those meals. But it's kind of heartbreaking when we used to just be able to give out meals to the kids and the parents couldn't eat. So we can use local dollars, we can use private dollars to make sure that when people show up to a feeding site, everybody that wants a meal gets one. We're also looking at different distribution methods for Children's Lunchbox, including a potential mobile site where we would use more of a food truck type model and be able to hit more places and do higher density, you know, talking with Cooking Lit Housing and NeighborWorks and places like that. We're already doing Lusac Place, which is right near Salvation Army as well, and that's been tremendously well received. So really have turned our model completely upside down in a very short period of time, but we've been able to push out, gosh, I was just looking at the numbers here. I think since COVID started for us, which was really kind of March 16th, we put in place our Children's Lunchbox programming, and March 21st, when we moved into the Sullivan Arena, we have been able to deliver over 109,000 meals here in Anchorage. So it's been quite the lift, and we're still figuring it out as we go, but appreciate the partnerships that we have, you know, certainly with Food Bank. I'd love to work more closely with the Major and with Salvation Army. I think we're doing a lot of supporting things. I think we need to communicate better with each other there, but there's certainly a lot of issues, even just in Anchorage, with getting the food out and having the staffing to be able to pay for the staffing to not only produce the food, but distribute the food. Because in the past, it's been volunteers, and that's not the model for now.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Lisa. Appreciate it. Let's go next to Dave Williams. David?
Hey, our story is a little bit different. We haven't been as affected in Alaska by the COVID, primarily because we maintain our primary mission is to provide immediate assistance during time of disaster. And so that's people who are displaced because of fire, because of floods, earthquakes, you name the natural disaster. What we did go through very quickly an amazing flood season in which we had very little effect of floods across the state, and actually set up and worked with no sheltering other than a bit of support for Chilixic, which had a few homes surrounded by water and about 4 homes actually affected. Historically, our mission nationwide is to be there to come in, provide what's known as ESF6 mass care for immediate assistance following a disaster. Included in that are sheltering and assuring feeding, making sure that people in those shelters are fed. Normally within Alaska, we do congregate sheltering. That has changed. COVID has changed that. We are looking for, and how do we do it in a non-congregate way? And how do we go into areas right now like the city of Anchorage, Fairbanks, Southeast, go to places that have already been wooed by other organizations looking for additional space for COVID and saying we need spaces for people who have been displaced because of a natural disaster, a village evacuated because of a flood, or now because of wildfire. We, as far as feeding, we work very well with Salvation Army and other organizations across the country. We work with organizations like the Southern Baptist, with Salvation Army, and with other organizations. We will often purchase the food. They will go ahead and prepare it, and then we will help with the distribution of same. As just stated, we can't do it in a congregate way anymore. We do have to package. We have to make sure that it gets out to individuals in little bags. Of what has happened, and historically looking at Alaska, a disaster in the valley or on the road system, in Anchorage, a larger one, we will get up, we will operate distribution of food in shelters, and we will continue to do so, congregate or non-congregate. We will make arrangements and ensure that is done up to the point that we can turn it over to another agency, and that's turning the client over. We have in the state of Alaska assistance for individual assistance through the state so that we can move people out of shelters and into other forms of hotels and things for a longer term as they go through their recovery. But we are recommending and using things like food bank of other resources that previous speakers have said there are already problems with them getting food. In villages, it's a different story. We often go in and we will go into congregate sheltering with COVID restrictions in village schools. We then often use the USDA stocks that are available, make arrangements with school districts, and use supplies that are there. Villages are, I will go and use the example of Galena. If you do have a larger flood or larger incident, the freezers of those homes are often destroyed. Villages do not have large stores, with the exceptions of the Gnomes, Kotzebues, Bethels, etc. Don't have big food distribution places. People store their food, they hunt and gather, and they very often have up to 6 months supply of food sitting in a freezer that just got destroyed. And how do you get that to them? How do you work with, make sure that they are getting what they need, getting out of an urban mindset that said if you just give them food, they can go to the store and buy some. How can we have that help them get food they need? And I'll just use an example of one of the happier results of a disaster was of Hooper Bay a few years back. I believe 15 homes were destroyed, 39 buildings. But enabling people to get what they needed to get in a boat with their tents and with their families and help go upriver and start to gather their food again and do traditional gathering probably did more to boost the morale of the village than actually having a bunch of stuff flown in and sitting there. And that was the odd one. We are Alaska. We did reach out to the Safari Club and actually replace some of their some of their guns so that they could hunt and do what they need. In rural Alaska, you have a better chance with small disasters of continuing to assist people. I call it, it's much more of a potluck, potlatch society where there is a lot of sharing and willingness to go into those freezers and share with people who are affected. Not so much in urban Alaska. That's where we start going into some of the problems that our other speakers have recently addressed. We are there to help, if need be, we will get food to them. I have had the fortune or misfortune to be on Saipan recently through a couple typhoons and watched us Red Cross fly in 747s with food on it. You do what you need to do to make sure that that's there. The ferry system was mentioned. We have another problem, and that's Raven. It is affecting the smaller villages in northern and western Alaska to a severe degree. Of getting anything in there on any time within any time frame is very, very unpredictable at this point, and does need to be addressed in a major way. At that point, we will continue to work. We will continue to work with our partners in assuring that people who are affected by disaster do get the relief they need, and that we work with them to assure that there are, when we transfer from that immediate period, they have resources available to continue with their recovery. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dave. Appreciate that update. We also have with us Paul Nelson with the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services. And Paul, would you like to?
Well, sure. So fascinating conversation. Thank you all for inviting me. When you guys first reached out, I really wasn't quite sure how we fit into this conversation and the things that you're doing, all the work you're doing. I knew we fit in. I just wasn't quite sure. But now, just listening for the last 30 minutes or so about what y'all talking about, I don't know if you need me here because you guys got it covered. I mean, you're thinking and doing and operating and executing the things that we really only have the operational coordination piece from the state government's perspective, from the emergency management perspective, here in the basement at JBER in the State Emergency Operations Center, which the real heroes are you and all the folks that are in your groups that are out there that are doing everything. So, I was trying to figure out a few things to say to add some value to me taking up your time. So you really helped me with that. David, Captain John, or Major John, Captain Denise, Lisa, very well said. It's a good update for me. I get updates literally by the hundreds on a daily basis in the COVID. So trying to think of anything I could add to the conversation that would be worthy. So I do have a couple things. And I do apologize. Honestly, coming in here, I really didn't know what to expect. I didn't even know if we were all Alaskans, but it sounds like we're all Alaskans. So, so that's good. So I apologize if I speak. I've picked up a couple things that we have some folks with ICS experience. So yeah, I apologize if I speak below anyone here. Again, I'm the new guy. Obviously, I'm in a room, a virtual room full of very highly intelligent and competent people. So I apologize if I speak below you. From the emergency management perspective, our job is operational coordination, right? I have, first of all, I'm brand new to the position. As a matter of fact, I'm not even the actual director. I'm the acting director right now. I've been with this organization about 2 years. Prior to that, I've been an International Guardsman. I was part of our rescue forces that you've read about in the news or seen on the news. So I did get the opportunity throughout about 30 years of my life to fly in incredible aircraft all over the state, rural Alaska, urban Alaska, every corner. And now here, I've got about 60 people. We all live in Anchorage, or the Anchorage or the Mat-Su borough, and we work here on JBER in the big green building that you see from Glen Highway. That's a challenge because I don't have rural offices or people that are out there. So a lot of the things that you guys highlighted, when weather rolls in and being able to travel to communities, it's very difficult for us as well. We're facing the same challenges you all are facing. So our part is operational coordination. Our part in food security is really comes when there's a declared disaster, and we work with our volunteer organizations active in disasters, our Red Cross, our Salvation Army, Samaritan's Purse, other faith-based organizations are incredibly important. And I talk to my peers from the other states and territories and why they use them. I don't think anybody relies as heavily on them as the state of Alaska does. So again, you guys are the real heroes. So, you know, we set up our mass care task force based on the situation. We have one set up right now with a food working group or a feeding working group, which, you know, you already highlighted, you know, Lisa, I'm sure is familiar with that. You're actually doing the operational level work of that. We're just up here at the coordination level. So our biggest thing, our biggest focus from the emergency management perspective is to minimize, mitigate, and ultimately, if we're successful, ensure that there's no disruption in the food supply chain, the bigger chain, the couple levels up from where you guys are operating out there to the people, the customers, the people in need, right? So there's a few things that are going on with that. And a bunch of people have already highlighted that it's the water is even muddier now because of the COVID response. I believe maybe it was Captain Denise was talking about, you know, having to get, you know, having a struggle getting things from, you know, outside of Alaska that are not easily obtained now, right? Whereas if we have, let's say, a catastrophic event like an earthquake, the 2018 earthquake was bad, but frankly, we're Alaskans, it could have been much worse, right? So, you know, it could have been a lot worse. It just could have been. And had it been a lot worse, now we are truly isolated, right? There's a certain degree of isolation. A lot of us actually enjoy it. I'm one of them. But in a time like that, where we have our downtown in rubbles and our port below the water, it could have been much worse. So, but we wouldn't have had a problem having goods available in the lower 48. Our problem would have been point of distribution, is a phrase that we use in emergency management, right? It's actually getting it to Alaska, not overloading Alaska, and then being able to get it out to points of distribution where your organizations take over and get it to that customer, right? So that's why, you know, truly are, I know it's just a catchphrase, but we are all in this together. So we're focusing on that couple echelons above because we have total faith that your organizations and your people have got it. Once we get it down there to that operational level, you guys got it from there. You know, so that's really reassuring. So that's our big thing is that. And another thing, although it's not a focus of your working group, your think group here, it is critical and it does have a bunch of touch points to food distribution, and that is fuel, right? I think it was David, you mentioned, you know, subsistence needs in rural Alaska. Well, that's heavily relying on fuel as well, right? To get to those fish houses, to get to those fish camps, to be able to go out and do those hunts, they need the fuel, right? They're very stoic, they're very resilient folks out there, but they need those simple tools like fuel to get out and be able to do those subsistence hunts. So we think and we talk about those all the time up here at the operational coordination level. And I didn't think I was gonna have much to offer, but I did. I really like where you guys are going, and I think I have no problem participating and giving you the state's perspective. I will tell you that we had about a decade ago under, and I'm getting all this secondhand because I've only been with the organization about 2 years, but we had, I believe it was under the Parnell administration, there was an idea that floated about shelf-stable food and a big warehouse and everything. And it actually flowed through the budget from the state. I personally now, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback it, right? Because it was a decade ago, it was a whole different group of people, but I don't think it was thought out very well. It's my personal opinion, you know. So they put out that contract for about 840,000 shelf-stable foods, right? The contract was bid on. The winner of the bid was disputed. They did take into a lot of consideration. They did some good things. They took into considerations like cultural preferences and stuff like that. And they really had a hard time filling it. When they did finally decide on a bidder to fill it, it was contested. And at the end of the day, They decided not to award the contract. Then we kind of went into about 2013, because these things never happen fast in state government or federal government. The money kind of went back into the general fund, and the idea kind of died away, quite frankly. And the reason I don't think it was a good idea, it sounds like a great idea, but realistically, it's not a good idea because the things that were left out of it that I could just look at the idea and say that it wasn't well thought through was there was no sustainment dollars. So even shelf-stable foods eventually go bad and need to be replaced, right? So there has to be sustainment, and that wasn't considered. The storage was an issue, right? And there's another thing. We're dealing with COVID right now, but Alaska's catastrophic plan is built around the 64 earthquake model, which means that it really does take out the municipality. When I say take out, I mean that we are not operational now. Although that disaster happens here in the municipality of Anchorage and the surrounding area, Mat-Su Borough, Kenai Peninsula, as it did in 2018, that becomes effectively immediately a state disaster, a statewide disaster, because it affects everybody from Barrow to Southeast to the YK Delta because of our distribution. So we're really focusing now on, right now we're working with FEMA to the Alaska Catastrophic Plan, using the modeling and stuff, and to update that. And we're hoping to have that done at the end of this summer, although COVID might, have something to say in that. And then after that, we are working on a point of distribution plan, which is going to hub out these goods and services out to a number of points in the state where we will, again, heavily rely on local government, volunteer organizations active in disasters, and anybody else that will move that around. And we are really listening to our community. So I've talked enough. I thank you all for including me in your conversation. I learned a ton. It was just nice to hear from everybody and meet everybody virtually. I will always be available to answer questions. If I don't have the answer, I will get it for you. And I thank you so much for inviting me today.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. All right, Terry, we have a couple of questions in the chat, and then we can open it up to everybody. And this is basically for everybody and that has spoken today. What capacity do the agencies have for fresh local foods, and how do you handle that? What resources do you have or do you need in order to be able to handle more fresh local foods?
Can start on that one if you'd like. It's actually something we've been pretty focused on the last year or two. We've been working with several local farmers who have been donating kind of their not so pretty perfect produce and doing some gleaning at the end of the season and donating items left from the day at farm markets. And we got some grants to put in place some better equipment so that we can dehydrate food, we can properly seal food. So we've been putting up, for example, I think we did almost 10,000 pounds of zucchini last fall. And so instead of our clients having to eat zucchini every day for the month of August and September, we were able to put it up in a variety of ways. Some of it was sliced thin and par blanche, so it could be made into vegetable lasagna. Some of it was shredded to go into zucchini bread. Some of it was just cubed to go into stir fries or a vegetable mix. Trying to preserve the fresh items and then be able to use them later on has been really valuable for us. Our capacity is limited by the equipment we have to prepare it, the freezer space and refrigeration space we have, and now the fact that we need to hire people to do it because we don't have the volunteer workforce we used to have. But it's something we're super interested in, and we were really starting down that path until COVID kind of came, and we're trying to figure out what that's going to look like for this late summer and fall season as our local produce comes online.
Great, thanks. Anybody else want to take a stab at that?
As for us at the Salvation Army, we have, walk-ins, we have big freezers, fridges, and then one of our buildings was damaged last year because of 2017 because of the earthquake. And so, getting that back online so we can have that storage space as well. But just to echo what Lisa said, it's getting those large bulk items and then also working with our friends at the Department of Corrections at their farm and possibly getting their produce as well.
Yeah, we got a lot from them too. They were great. Potatoes for days.
Yeah.
Now, Denise, can I ask you, are you guys, partially blanching or partially cooking some of the items to store them for later, such as potatoes and zucchini, that kind of thing? Or how are you guys treating those pretty items you need to use relatively quickly?
We are freezing as well. So with our Older Alaskans program and, like right now, so as we're getting in bulk, we're able to cook and put into containers and seal them and then freeze them. And then that could go out as emergency food or, it's freshly cooked. However, it's frozen meals. And so we're able to do that as well.
Okay, we have another question about whether or not any of the agencies have applied to the USDA program for coronavirus food assistance to purchase from Alaska farmers.
I'm not sure which specific program that is because there are so many. I know there were several. There was the produce boxes. And I know there was some gnashing of teeth over that, is my understanding, because it wasn't really awarded to anybody in Alaska, but then some of it was still sent out and distributed by some like Charlie's and some of our local purveyors. So you'd have to be more specific. I mean, we've applied for a lot of different things and are working with the state in different ways, but I'm not sure which specific program that is. If somebody has a link they could send me, I'd love to look into it.
I would say the same. We have so many grants that we rely on, and even with COVID, there have been so many that have come in that specifics. And if there's an opportunity an after meeting to be able to send us that we could look into it specifically and get that back to you, that would be helpful. I mean, I don't want to sound like we're swimming in money, but we have hundreds and hundreds of grants that we get in that to be able to pinpoint it exactly is really a challenge. Unless Denise, specifically, it's hard for me to be able to speak to that.
I know.
Okay, well, we do have Cara Durr here with the food bank, and she, Cara, do you want to speak to the federal stimulus bill?
Yeah, I thought I would just share, obviously there's hopefully going to be another federal stimulus bill, and we've been working on advocating for, various provisions in that. But one of the provisions that Feeding America, which is kind of our national affiliate at Food Bank of Alaska, is pushing is additional infrastructure for food banks and agency partners. And it kind of speaks to that need for cold storage, for transportation dollars. And so the ask is $543 million for this. And so we've been really trying to push that to our delegation because, we hear a lot from agencies and we have the same capacity issues. And, with all this food that we've got from COVID, which is great, we've had to rent off space or off warehouse storage. I know, Lisa's had to do the same. So I think that would be really good, and I can, share any information, but anything this group can do to kind of support that, I think would be really important for kind of long-term capacity and preparedness for the state, really.
Great, thank you. Al Barrett, you want to say something? Go ahead, Al.
Thank you. I'll just introduce myself because I'm probably the odd guy here, just an Alaskan citizen. Been here for 30 years. I own a fur tannery. I'm a member of the Alaska Board of Game, been very involved with the Alaska Board of Fish. And so, and I've heard, things mentioned about Galena and traditional foods. And so I've been batting around this idea since the Galena floods about traditional foods. Because when they showed up out there with a pallet full of MREs, some of the residents out there are like, what is this and how do we use it? They're like, I think it was Dave was mentioning, using the traditional foods of fish or moose meat or caribou is more important to them. And so I discovered this, and it's not a new system, but I think it's worthy of looking into, is retort packing, which gives you long, stable shelf life. It gives you meals ready that could be heated up in water very simply or eaten cold. And what I've seen in all these years in Alaska and dealing with wildlife management is the amount of waste of our wildlife resources. You know, for example, there's hundreds of moose killed by cars and trains, you know, on the road system here. And a moose is basically 1 ton of moose is about 6 moose. You know, so we kill hundreds of them accidentally. That, you know, you could produce a ton of food by repacking it, you know, in this retort fashion, and be able to have it stored in places that, you know, people can use. And you can add the rice, you can add the potatoes, you can add the vegetables like somebody else was saying, and you can make complete meals, you know, very cheaply and store it for a long time. And somebody mentioned about rotation. Since this is an annual thing in Alaska, you know, once those expiration dates start getting close, you redistribute that food to, you know, the food banks, to the Salvation Army, and you get it out there for the use, you know, the homeless people in Anchorage. And so you'll have this continual flow of, you know, wild foods, fish and game, you know, available to us. And it wouldn't cost. I've been researching it, and, you know, to get started up and have some buildings and have some equipment and some freezer space to store things till you can pack it. You know, you're looking at about $500,000. And somebody mentioned about all the grant monies out there. I think it would be perfect. I think some of those grants would apply to starting up something centrally located, maybe like in Anchorage or Fairbanks, and start this process of gathering these moose and fish. You know, there's tons of fish that's confiscated by Fish and Wildlife troopers, you know, which gets redistributed, but you need freezers, you need people to take care of it. Well, if you could get it to, you know, get it in a frozen state and get it to a building, a retort packing building, where you could process that fish and get it into those retorts, I think this is very sustainable, and I think this solves a lot of problems. I don't think 800,000 meals, like somebody else had mentioned from Homeland Security or the Parnell administration 10 or so years ago, is not unachievable. And I think it would happen in a very short time with the amount of tonnage of fish and wildlife that we basically throw away or it goes unused. And so you know, Meade Treadwell is the one that turned me on to your group, because I was batting it off with him, you know, for, you know, maybe an investment, because I think there's, you know, also a business opportunity about this. You know, just doing it for the local people that harvest caribou and moose and fish, if they could retort pack it into their meals they like, you know, spaghetti, chilies, stroganoffs, and all they need is a pantry. They don't need a freezer to store 400 pounds of moose meat.
Okay, that's a very interesting idea. Paul, did you have something you wanted to say about that?
Well, I would like to make a comment. Yes, sir. Alan, I'll tell you, from the emergency management standpoint, we believe truly that the private sector is the key to success in any type of recovery from any type of disaster in the state of Alaska, right? Oftentimes we try to define what does recovery look like, right? Well, it's when the private sector is taking care of their business, their communities, their homes, and the federal government is no longer involved, and even the state government is back to a state of normal operations, so to speak, right? So I love what you're thinking about. I can, as a member of the executive branch of the state government, I cannot officially endorse it, but as an Alaskan citizen and an avid outdoorsman, I could say that keep after it, because I think that's a great idea. That's it.
Yeah, I love it, Alan. Actually, this is Lisa, and we've been working too with UAA before kind of everything started with COVID about using more traditional foods in our programs. You know, our clients tend to be 50 to 70% Alaska Native, so we want to be culturally appropriate, and frankly, it's some of the healthiest food in the world you can eat. So this is something we've been super interested in, and we did get through UAA a grant to get like a commercial grinder and a few things so we could better process and deal with wild game meat, and we are super interested in something like this, so I'd love to connect with you offline and have further discussions about it.
Great, wonderful, thank you. We have a couple of other questions, and actually, if folks want to open up your microphones, I'll call on you to ask questions. Terry is wondering about the freezer capacity for the various organizations that you have at which distribution points. So can you help us understand the lay of the land in terms of freezer capacity and at what distribution points?
Well, I'm the littlest one probably in that market. We have 2 walk-in freezers and 2 walk-in coolers, one for each program. I can tell you we need way more. We were actually just pricing what it would cost to get a kind of exterior freezer kind of unit, be about $40,000. It's something we're looking at because we do want to be able to properly process the produce and things we're hoping to get this fall. We have been super fortunate in that the amount of food donations we've received is larger than anything we've ever received. And that comes from both the food bank, it comes from individual restaurants that shut down during COVID, came from Princess Cruises, it's come from Sea Share, you know, really everywhere, and all different types of items. We definitely need more, especially freezer space. You know, we need the reefer until we can process it and then put it into the freezer basically. And probably our hardest thing to move and get rid of, if there's one item we probably don't need more sent up to Alaska for, at least for our population and even through our children's lunchbox, is like leaf lettuce, because it just doesn't hold long enough and there's virtually no way to process it. That's been kind of an issue with some of the produce boxes that have been coming in. We're having a hard time moving that leaf lettuce out. But absolutely, we have a need for way more freezer capacity. And I think I can speak for Kara and the food bank that they do as well.
I think for us, because of the fact that we are strategically located across the state, we have many different units that we can send food to. When we were at the height of distributing food to Southeast Alaska, we utilized 3 locations, Juneau, Sitka, and Ketchikan, as hubs, which have larger storage, larger refrigeration and freezer capacity to be able to meet the needs of some of the smaller communities. The same thing here in Anchorage. We do, and we have been blessed with several different locations that we can put food in and store things. It does make it a little bit challenging if we store a bunch of stuff out in the valley because we have space out there, you know, getting it back and forth, that tends to be the problem. One thing I do want, it's sort of been mentioned, and Lisa, you talked about this a while back ago when you first started talking about, and this is something that we see very much right now, is the amount of money that is being given to us as nonprofits for food. The problem is it's only for food. That has been a real hardship for us because we've had to furlough a lot of employees because we can't open up, well, we just did, but our thrift stores had to be put down, had to be closed up. We had to furlough a number of people. With the volunteer base that we regularly rely on, some of those are in the most vulnerable populations, so they can't come out and volunteer for us, which puts us at an extreme hardship of trying to be able to conduct the work that needs to be done, feeding the people, and there isn't any money for that. We can't even go out and hire extra people or be able to increase salaries because they're now considered hazardous pay. Even so much as trying to find money to buy freezers or refrigerators. I mean, you get millions of dollars coming to us for food, period, just food. But transporting that food, like again, sending that stuff up to Bethel, you know, Paul, you were right in the fact that Raven's now down. So then now you're, not that Alaska Airlines is a bad, but you know, your options are very limited, and there is very little dollars for those operational things that we need to be able to continue to provide the services to the state, whether it's people, whether it's locations, whether it's just logistically moving things. That's a huge problem for us. If we're going to go into the next 6-9 months when the ferries are back down again, and if there's an issue, because we knew there was last year, again, before COVID even hit, our villages of Hoonah and Angoon were suffering with food insecurity. We had a hard time trying to figure out how to get it to them. We could get it to Juneau, but getting it from Juneau to Angoon is a completely different ballgame. And I mean, we're seriously talking about having to airlift stuff into those villages. So, you know, it's great that we get the support from the government, from the state, from the city for food, but there's got to be some opportunity to look beyond that, to supply dollars for us to hire people, to get the necessary capital in order to sustain this for years to come.
Hey, Major, this is Terry Smith. Are there restrictions on when you say that you're restricted to food, which that's, you know, it's amazing both in whether you look at the medical industry and so on and healthcare, how you would expect that with COVID and with it hammering the healthcare industry, that you'd think that it would provide this massive amount of stimulus into that industry as well, when many of it broke down because of the COVID type of the virus restrictions and all that. So a lot of unintended consequences,
Right.
And it really demonstrated, I think, how fragile all of our supply chains are in all of our industries. My question is specific to looking at how you buy food. Could you not coordinate through the providers for turnkey solutions? So I'm going to buy that ham or whatever you're going to buy for your food services, and then work with those providers to do it turnkey and provide that labor and the transportation so that you get it on site through your distribution centers, but there's additional burden and support that comes with it. You know, so basically, I'm a food distribution warehouse, right? I'm a Linford, I'm a Cisco, I'm a whatever, and having them act as a coordinating organizations so that you could pay for the food, that you get a turnkey service.
It's possible, maybe in some of our larger communities, but again, in some of the small ones that we deal with in Southeast, they don't have. I mean, Angoon has one little tiny market. They don't have anything else in that village to be able to store, or they don't have options. So if the store is empty, which it was in November, they didn't have food on the shelves, people were coming to the Salvation Army. We don't even have a building large enough that has refrigerator or freezer space or even storage space that if we were to send food to them, that it could be stored so that we could hand it out. You know, again, we talk Anchorage, Juneau, Ketchikan, Fairbanks, you know, those are very large cities where we could do that in. I'm thinking of people, you know, places like Cordova or Yakutat or Bethel, Haines even, Klawock. I mean, we served a village of Metlakatla out of Ketchikan. We shipped over on the ferries because that's a privately owned ferry. So we could get the food over to Metlakatla because they don't have anything there. That's part of our problem, is that we can get food there, and then even, you know, if we break it down even more with, you look at COVID, I mean, we have relationships because the Salvation Army is large. I mean, we do have partners down in the lower 48 that can get food up here. But in a time like this, the stores and the distribution centers are finding it difficult because, you know, they're suffering from a financial standpoint. So it's this whole situation it's a disaster unto itself. It's so unique that we're all learning through the program. If it was a normal disaster, it's a whole lot easier. I mean, you know, Paul, you talked about, you know, the earthquake, and Terry, I think you did too. I mean, that was nothing, really. I mean, I lived through San Francisco and I lived through the one in Los Angeles. Those were huge things which caused mass devastation, and you were months trying to help and assist. This, I mean, we were up and running in a few days, and so it was very different. This whole situation is different as well, and my counterparts, I know I'm taking a lot of time, but I'm just sharing this. You know, we were talking with my counterparts down in the lower 48, and I said, you know, you guys have it very different than we do up here. If you don't have something, you can go to the next town and find it. You can go to the next Costco. We have 2, you know, here. I mean, it makes it very difficult for us. I said, when Canada's closed their borders, it makes it even more difficult. If you have shipping issues coming out of Seattle, it makes it even more difficult. You could get them to some locations, but then the distribution from there in some of the remote locations that we deal with becomes even more problematic because they don't have the space, the size, or the capacity, or even the transportation to be able to get stuff to them.
I just want to just, and I'm going to turn it over because we're running low on time, is I think what I'm really getting at is so my background is in both finance and transportation, and so when I look at supply chains, I kind of have a little different twist. And what I'm thinking is really reimagining the relationships and fit the box for how the money can be spent. You know, if you give me the restrictions, then let's build a system, a support system that can comply with those restrictions. And really, and I got to tell you, just so I was working with, and where this food study and food security kind of mandate came from is that I worked with some groups in the Valley on some entrepreneurial ventures and trying to develop food production, protein production, and produce production in the Valley. And what I learned was how fragmented, how broken it was, you know, and all of our fits and starts in Alaska. And what it really, what major markets have that we don't is this sense of market order. So, you know, you go and the way it's been described to me in Washington, state of Washington, and so on, the big buyers get together and they create a market order. And so that brings continuity into the discussion, because right now we're relying on single individual restaurants and buyers that, you know, are really pushing the development and risk onto the small farmer. And because there's no coordinating agency or policy that drives how are we going to manage this, you know, fragmented industry, both, you know, whether it be produce or protein, what have you. And so I'm just thinking to myself, if there's capacity right now, money available, it's maybe reimagining how we can fit the box. And I'm just going to leave it there so we can follow up, in, you know, in later discussions.
Good.
Thanks, Terry. We did have a reminder here that there is a food security, a community food security grants program that's coming out through the Division of Agriculture. Jody Anderson with UAF, who doesn't have a microphone today, but has provided some great information in the chat. That's going to be coming out this fall. And so that's something to look for with ag, and perhaps based on the conversation here, would be worthwhile to reach out to the Division of Agriculture and identify whether or not they're including some of those ancillary types of activities or costs that would be associated with food security activities for the various agencies. Make sure those costs are included in that grant program. And hopefully it's capacity building, not just food. It sounds like you guys have at least for the time being, got a substantial inventory. And I also just wanted to add to the conversation about transportation. When Alaska Airlines discontinued Combi flights in Alaska, it dramatically changed the quality of food in rural Alaska. And people who live in Cordova, talking about the loss of Combi flights and the loss of that freight, particularly for fresh food, and now the loss of ferry service. You know, the quality of food in the community has deteriorated significantly. So it's been a 1-2 hit, the loss of Combis, the loss of ferry service. So
and along with that, just the cost of anybody getting out. I was on a call the other day and somebody said that they were out in the western region, and the cost just to be able to get into Anchorage for, you know, healthcare stuff is now jumped to almost $2,000 a person per flight because Raven or others aren't out there. So it's, yeah.
Great. All right. Well, with that, we are a little bit over time. I apologize to everybody, but I do want to thank Paul Nelson had to leave to go to another meeting, but he sends his thanks and appreciation and wants to be in touch with some of our speakers today. I know he knows how to get a hold of you folks, but he just mentioned it. And we want to thank you, Major Brackenberry, Captain Denise Delgado, Lisa Sauter, and Dave Williams. We appreciate your participation today. You've provided some great food for thought, and I'm sure that a lot of the points that you've made will help inform the discussions moving forward. And with that, Terry, I'll toss it back to you if you have any final words.
No, I guess my, what a great last hour of discussion and ideas, and this environment is evolving so quickly. And, there's also some great momentum, and I hope that we can take the lessons learned and some of the, that momentum, and kind of, give this subject matter some juice to carry it forward, because we know how fragile our food distribution and food security is for all the lessons. We've seen so many examples today. So I just want to thank again all of our speakers, and encourage every one of them to stay involved in the topic, because your voice and your experience is crucial. So thank you, and we invite you to stay engaged, and hope to call on you for additional expert advice as we move through the process.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you again for putting this on and just having this discussion. I really appreciate it. It's good to hear other voices and just to sort of be able to talk and share and hopefully see things move forward.
Our pleasure. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye now.